Welcome to this explainer on sustainable gastronomy. If you think your dinner plate is just about calories, well, the United Nations research we're unpacking today is going to completely change how you look at your next meal. Let's just dive right into the numbers because they are pretty staggering.
Get this. Our current global food systems contribute roughly 1/3 of all greenhouse gas emissions on the planet. So we're talking about methane from livestock, heavy chemical fertilizers, and the massive land clearing required just to keep humanity fed.
But here's the truly shocking part. Roughly 1/3 of all that food we just went through the trouble of producing, it's entirely lost or wasted. Literally, it never even reaches a human stomach. Instead, it just sits and rots in landfills, emitting even more of those greenhouse gases.
And to grow that food, remember, 1/3 of which we're literally just throwing away, agriculture is draining about 70% of the world's freshwater supply. To put that into perspective, it's an incredibly thirsty system that is stretching our planet's resources to their absolute limits.
Which brings us to the true cost of food and why this is a global crisis. The way we operate creates this bizarre paradox. We're driving deforestation to clear land, we're eroding the soil, and we're killing off biodiversity through endless monoculture farming, and yet, somehow, despite producing so much food that we literally throw it in the trash, hundreds of millions of people are still facing food insecurity because of massive systemic distribution failures.
So how do we fix this? That's where defining sustainable gastronomy comes in as a survival framework.
This concept fundamentally redefines the word gastronomy. It's not just about elite, expensive restaurants anymore. It's about combining agriculture, ecology, nutrition, and economics. It forces us to look at the entire life cycle of what we eat, from the soil it grows in all the way to waste management, and figuring out how to minimize harm at every single step of the way.
To actually make that happen, we need to break down the solution into 3 core pillars.
This is absolutely crucial because it shows we can't just fixate on the environment. Sure, we need low-carbon, regenerative agriculture to reduce ecological harm, but if farmers aren't making a fair living, that's the economic pillar right there. The whole system collapses. And then you have the social and cultural pillar, which ensures we're respecting diverse traditional cuisines and actually getting equitable access to nutrition for the communities that need it most. Now let's look at the farm-to-table network and figure out exactly where these emissions are happening. You know, research proves that massive emissions don't just happen out on the farm. It's actually a 5-step journey. You've got agricultural production, sure, but then there's processing, incredibly heavy transportation, retail, and finally, your own consumption and waste. Every single one of these stages compounds the environmental impact. It's a massive, interconnected chain.
So let's talk about the challenges and the tech solutions we can use as interventions.
The roadblock we hit here is pretty obvious. Our current industrial model is entirely optimized for cheap efficiency. It demands high-yield monocultures and globalized supply chains, pretty much regardless of the ecological cost. Sustainable gastronomy, on the other hand, demands the exact opposite, prioritizing sustainability, boosting biodiversity, and building up local resilience.
But we are fighting back with some really serious food tech. Imagine AI-driven precision farming that uses sensors to distribute just the exact right amount of water, or blockchain technology, tracking your food's exact carbon footprint so supply chains are totally transparent. Add in lab-grown meats and alternative proteins to bypass livestock emissions altogether, plus new carbon pricing models to finally start penalizing those harmful industrial practices.
And on the culinary front, chefs are acting as vital intervention points. By pioneering root-to-stem and nose-to-tail cooking, think turning carrot tops into a really delicious pesto instead of just throwing them in the trash. They don't just save money, they're actually designing low-impact menus, sourcing locally, and subtly educating the consumer to normalize zero-waste eating.
Which brings us right down to the power of your plate and your personal impact.
Because when you're faced with this massive, entrenched industrial system and a looming global climate crisis, it's totally natural to wonder, can small changes actually work? Do your individual grocery choices even make a dent in the grand scheme of things?
Well, the evidence absolutely says yes, they do. Shifting toward plant-forward diets and actively reducing your own household food waste attacks that staggering 1/3 global waste statistic we talked about directly. By choosing minimally processed, seasonal foods and supporting your local farmers, your small, everyday behavioral changes collectively force the entire global supply chain to adapt.
Ultimately, transforming our food system isn't just a problem for global politicians to figure out. It's a pretty empowering truth that the future of the planet is quite literally sitting on your plate. Every meal represents a decision. So, the next time you sit down for dinner, you have to ask yourself, are you feeding the industrial machine or are you funding a sustainable future? The data is clear, but what will your next bite be?